All right, good evening. All right, welcome everybody. I think kick this off. I'm going to start with some basic material that gets into, I guess you could say, what is it that I'm talking about here. Just as a quick intro, this is helping give an explanation as to deciphering like some of the more like really far out and esoteric stories that go on relative to underground facilities, and then what is the more tangible reality about what is being done, with these things. Okay. And I to give you some background, and I'll show you some articles that demonstrate this. I was basically born near Seattle, Washington, in Seattle, Washington, raised in the Woodinville, Bothell area. And my parents, basically, the house is on my birth certificate, that's registered on my birth certificate, rests above the entrance and tunnel system within one of these underground facilities. And so I've effectively been born into an ecosystem that's close to all this, and why it exists and who built it and why they had other reasons to build it aside from just simple defense reasons. So I'll get into like what they are, why they exist, etc. Um, and then what's been done with them since then. So a quick background, guys. What are Nike missile silos? And I'm going to show you an article about that. A quick summary: they're just basically some basic underground bunkers. You go into an underground, staircase usually. Sometimes they have elevators, and then it takes you into a silo area where there is missiles actually stored in these places that would raise and defend America in the event of a nuclear attack or some other missile attack. That's what they were effectively designed for. However, they basically, we had so many of them in our country. I mean, they built these things all over the place. Sorry, guys. This, I promise you, humorous here. The chair squeaks a lot, so I promise you, it really is the chair. I know everybody says that, but it is. but but I just wanted you to know about the whole ecosystem. That these things have existed for a long time. They continue to exist, and most of them got, well, I honestly don't know if most of them, I really don't know what the ratio is as far as which ones are decommissioned relative to which ones are still actively manned and facilitated. I don't think that like that many are. I think in many cases, and I suppose if they were, they would probably have more classified GPS coordinates and things of that nature. But the thing is, guys, what I'm telling you here, though, as far as like mapping these underground facilities, is extremely easy. The databases exist, not maybe not all over the place, but for like Nike missile silos, for example, you can get a partial database. I personally do not believe it's complete. I think that they're hiding pretty much anything to do with Oregon. I do think that there were missile programs and underground facilities installed in Oregon that are just simply omitted from current databases for reasons for whatever. Probably because the people that own the underground ones just don't want them to be known that are in Oregon. And I have a pretty good intuition as to why that is and where they connect to. I think I even know where some of the entrance to the Oregon ones are, but they're just, again, they're not listed on a map. And these are ones that I've actually marked in certain areas because I kind of know how the silo system worked. Nike missile silos, and I'll do a diagram later on, they usually rested on like a couple of hill rises. So there would be like a hilltop, and then it would be bored into the hilltop, and then you would have like a few levels, I guess, or a couple levels, and then you would have another one that would be nearby. And so one would be designated CS, and the other one would be designated LS. And there'd be two of these silo hatches that you could go into. And my understanding, though I haven't seen this diagram, is that the CS and LS hatches in many cases, if not all or most, were connected somehow via some kind of tunnel system so that you could access both areas between the two of them. And one of them, which is named S-03-LS, was 3 blocks away from the house that I was born into. So, I mean, that's how close I've been to this whole thing involving Nike missile silos specifically. Beyond that, I just have a family that's always been heavily into the nuclear industry since the 80s at least, And then you have things that I've discovered about both sides, that there's connections to secret Hollywood bloodlines, actors that had many children, that some went into Hollywood and don't use their actual faces to make films with, or they use some variation on their actual face that gets slightly modified before you see it put into film. A system that's existed long before computer generated imagery as we currently know it. There was things that were done with optical bend that changed people's appearances, and that's what's connected to people that I tend to be related to, if my research is correct. Now, I'm going to get into, like, the reason I'm talking about this. Number one is that I kind of understand, right, that it's not a very favorable topic to mention to like everybody, because not everybody uses the underground silos for negative purposes. For example, so just to give you a history, and I'll play an article here shortly, but the silos that have been repurposed, a lot of people have bought them. And so now what you have are extensive systems that are like, and let me put up a quick diagram of something that I can show you from Twitter and YouTube. Hang on here. I can kind of show you actually that even on YouTube, and I can even probably just play in the back corner here, like an actual tour given by, I think it's the guy's daughter who of the owner that owned. Sorry, I just realized my stream has probably been skipping because I had Google Earth up, and this should probably fix it. So hopefully that takes care of it. No, it didn't. There we go. All right. Hopefully that took care of it. If it's been a little bit lagging or skipping around, I think that probably will take care of it. That tends to hog a lot of processes. Hang on real quick. All right. So this is a thread that I did basically on Twitter. It's actually just a search that I did on silo, just the word silo. But I just said I've been telling people about this for years now. I provided locations and historical data about the bloodline family involvement from my own experiences with them. I was born 3 blocks from Project Nike Missile Silo S-03-LS. There's a cold case murder near the entrance, and there was child abuse in the neighborhood that I'm very much aware of. Okay. So I was raised in a neighborhood that was close to this one here, S-03-LS. That's off of 228th and Bothell, Washington, specifically. Again, sometimes people bring up these super esoteric stories, and I'll kind of chime in to say, like, look, once you drill down past like all of the the stories that are there just to sort of shock people that involve like aliens and insects and things like that, that you're like, really? I mean, are you sure? That's honestly, guys, I don't have any stories like that. I mean, all I can tell you is that things go on underground that normally don't go on above ground. Routes are provided underground that are hidden above ground, and that's really, it's not that much more complicated. It's really, people call them rat lines. I mean, there's all kinds of words you can use for them. The places the rat lines often empty out into are called brownstones. And then brownstones are something that have been historically used for all kinds of things. And like they'll like basically take a apartment complex or an office building, and part of it will be used for legitimate purposes to give it all like the surface level sheen. So like in the case of the apartment complex, it'll look like a legitimate one. Some of the residents there are legit, they're there for regular reasons. They don't know anything about what's going on. And then other ones there usually have more permanence to them, and they'll be connected to the underground operations, and then they're nearly permanent fixtures of the places. And then you'll find these people connected to the lower levels oftentimes where there's the entrances. Sometimes they could even be in an upper level entrance to throw people off that just connects to something that's underneath the entire building. I've specifically researched areas that I got as far as what I think is the synthetic entrance to where the tunnel went. And I was doing this by measuring signals. I was in a building that I was very strongly suspecting was doing some degree of significant shenanigans with this. I got out a spectrum analyzer and I started walking around, and I was just observing very anomalous things with signal behavior. Like for example, the like I would go into a lower level, and a signal that should be coming from a tower was getting stronger as I got lower in the building, and some of these levels were even a little bit below ground. And so, if it's coming from a cell phone tower like it should have been, really the signal should have been getting weaker unless somebody had installed some form of signal enhancement. These are oftentimes called network extenders, or they're called distributed antenna systems in some cases. There's lots of different methods people have. Femtocell is another name for them, e-femtocell. Um, Ways that people can bring in a cell phone signal into an underground area that normally would not get a signal above ground. Just so you guys know, I speak about this from experience just beyond my upbringing. When I worked in my last 2 years, I was a contractor for one of the largest, if not the largest, probably, no, well, it's kind of hard to know which one's the largest anymore, but I pretty much worked for, except for AT&T, I've pretty much now, I think I've probably spent time as a contractor working on the network of the top five, within those areas. Let's see, Sprint, US Cellular, yeah, Verizon. I mean, I've done work on their systems, guys. I've actually been in the infrastructure of their systems. I've had access to the infrastructure of their systems, done optimization activities, installation activities, design activities for some of these companies. Actually, yeah, Verizon specifically, I was doing optimization for in building scenarios. So when you do that type of work, it gives you access to the hatches on the rooftops, ladders and hatches that go underneath, access to things that go underground. You're oftentimes asked to access things that go underground specifically because you're entrusted in those jobs, you know, entrusted. Look, I didn't do anything terribly top secret. I mean, really nothing, quote, top secret, but I was definitely, while I did that job, put into places where you could not get in there without security accesses. Like they would have to give me a clearance. They would have to, check all my credentials. I would have to go through security gates. They would do things like frisk or even go through all my gear. I have been in scenarios like that where I had to go through things like that to even do my job. I've done things like optimized in-building distributed antenna systems that brought signals into prisons, for example, or jails. Really, not. I don't think any of them qualified as a quote prison, but I did definitely do like county jails or county prisons, whatever you would call those, where there were some pretty serious characters. So they weren't just county jails like the Clink, I guess you could call them, but yeah, there was definitely some like pretty significantly sized jails that I wound up doing in building system performance for. And these DAS systems basically, what I try to say here, guys, I'm just basically trying to explain to you that when I was within these things, I became more aware of all of the various ways that, number one, signals can be distributed creatively. So I was used to, prior to having that job the last 2 years within the wireless industry, I stopped doing this work about basically the first like January of 2016. I officially kind of called it quits. Okay. And I haven't gone back to the wireless industry since. And I actually did enjoy the place that I was working at. And I thought a lot of the people were cool there, but I think that just the exposure to the information, I had my head kind of buried in the sand about what could be done with signals. And doing DAS work, distributed antenna system work for 2 years, like I learned things that I just didn't know about. I learned about ways that you could do things that I just didn't understand before. I'd never been taught before. And then once I learned these creative ways of pumping signals into rooms or bringing them into basements or bringing them into private, like tunnel systems or underground systems for power companies is another thing that I would do. I once did a system for a military and intelligence facility that was kind of like partially underwater and underground and partially above ground. And so, again, these are like the types of systems that I've been entrusted to work on, guys. And I do, I don't like going into detail. And I'm not going to tell you like what all those places are like and things like that. I'm not that guy. I'm not just dying to tell you things, but I know enough about how easy it is to bore underground and tie buildings together just based on the things that I saw. I optimized oftentimes mall systems. I got into their sub basements. I got onto their rooftops. Mini malls, I got into the sub basements. I got onto the rooftops. So anytime you hear these like conspiracy theories, guys, about people going like they had something in the basement, or they had a thing that was tunneling into this area, or a staircase that went into that. Like, I'm not your average person. Like, I've had the ability from work experience, from growing up around underground systems, all of it. Literally being born in a house, later on, actually, the house we moved into right after we left that neighborhood was kind of like half in the hill and half exposed. Like part of I think the window was even buried in dirt, if I remember correctly, or some not buried in dirt, but like had dirt right next to like where the window hit sill was. That's how much the house was partially in dirt. And I basically was in the basement on a hilltop in that house. Sorry, that's probably unnecessary details there. I don't mean to be too whatever with it, but I'm going to try to keep this one relatively short. I don't want this to last forever. I want to give you a quick diagram. So this is just my background, what I know about number one, just from historical things, what are close to my family, what have they been doing, behind the scenes potentially. I don't really know. I just know that it just seems like anytime there's something involving deep underground military base or missile silos or anything else like that, gee, we just seem to be right there next to it or right above it. And I can't help that as far as what I grew up around and everything else like that. I'm just aware that happened. And so many of you might have seen some of my interviews on the Bases Project. That might be how you're familiar with me through these interviews. And I did discuss those topics a little bit there too. There's just some bizarre fake things going on tonight. Hang on here, guys. Okay, I'm not going to pay attention to it. The there's the Nike missile silos that I was raised above, which are in Bothell, Washington. Like I said, the S-03-LS, and then you take that and what really made this like just slap me in the face, I guess you could say, as far as like how all the information ties together. I literally, when I was on my last contract before I retired, I was assigned to the Seattle area, which I did not want to live in. I just did not want to accept the contract there, but the group that they were forming was going to be based in Bellevue. And so the guys said, yeah, long term, you might be able to go to Oregon and work as a regional person there. But right now, we all have to be together in the Seattle area until I establish a team, and then we can be more spread out. So I agreed to that. I was like, fine, I'll spend a year in Seattle or whatever, but my intention was if I didn't get to go back to Oregon, I wasn't going to continue on. And so I stayed on that contract and I did all this DAS work. It's called distributed. It's literally the work I did was called in-building system performance engineering. This is when I learned about hidden antennas, like drop-down antennas, ways to conceal antennas in tiles. Sometimes I was literally a person that was assigned to locate a system that had been concealed or hidden, and then a person found inside their facility and were like, we don't know what this is. Can you send, like they would call like when I worked at Verizon on a contract, they would like call a sales rep sometimes and they would say something like, we don't know what's inside our building. And, we have this repeater thing in here and these antennas and we don't know where it goes to. Can you please send somebody down to investigate it? And so sometimes I was literally the person that did that. They would just send me down there and I had some equipment that I used to sweep and test and do signal analysis with. And I had really good test gear too, man. When you work at a company like that, I really do actually, this is a part that I actually miss about working for a company like them. The equipment was just top notch. I mean, like nobody could afford this type of equipment in average everyday life. You pretty much have to have your own company or those kind of like fat pockets to buy this type of equipment. It's pretty amazing, but you can literally like quickly find nearly anything with it. And, you got to have at least some industry experience, I think, to run most of it. But it doesn't always require a genius to do it, honestly. Wow, that's amazing, actually. So, yeah, somebody says, do I know anything about smart floors? Water damaged wood that grows fungi is able to generate low levels of electricity from the pressure of footsteps walking above the floorboards. That's pretty amazing. Like, if you have any information on that, please send it. Or if you have a link or something like that, I have all my, did I put them there? I think it's there. Yeah, I believe in the description you should find my contact details. If you have a link to that information, go ahead and send it to me because, yeah, I've talked about systems that involve like in floor heating coils. And then if you know that like there's metal sometimes that are used for those heating coils and if they're conductive and somebody just puts like a wire in it and some water and then makes it more of a piezoelectric process, yeah, that can turn into a body electricity kind of shocking plasma harvesting system. Yeah. The irony, guys, is like the system that I found that can do this is they're called Warma. And the bizarre thing about that, and I promise you I'm not being cheeky, I was surprised to find it too. That's literally the name of my Aunt Catherine that was in the Department of Justice. And it's not a name I'd ever heard outside of her until I found that company that has these water systems that are inside floors. You guys, I'm not even making this up. I can even send it to you. So yeah, please do send that to me, the noises. I would appreciate that. All right. So as far as like what are these silos that I'm talking about, tonight's going to be just about giving you guys as quickly as I can. I don't want this to last forever. I want this to be like some epic long presentation, but it's to help you understand that within the realm of this is a question everything lesson for everybody. I want people that are regular out there to understand this, and I want my coworkers that used to be back in the day to understand this because you got to be way more creative as far as detecting the doping of digital forensics. Nowadays, you can make a person look guilty or innocent of anything without it actually happening. And it's very easy to create digital footprints that make a person look guilty or innocent, or create digital footprints that offset a person's true activities. What would this be useful for? Mostly it's used, I believe personally, for trafficking. It's used to help people, like, well, I wasn't in that place picking up that big shipment of, cocaine. And then, that way that person's GPS coordinates can be falsely attributed someplace else. They can still use a phone in certain circumstances, but when they use it, it won't georeference to the location that people would think. I mean, they're coming up, if you think about it, guys, like in modern technology, the thing that I learned, especially the last years of my career, it was already getting spooky. The types of accesses that I had personally, I don't think it's even spooky, guys. I mean, you just need these tools to do your job when you're in performance engineering. All I can tell you is that my ability to track a person and know exactly what's going on is spooky. It really is when it comes to my former job. Now, not now, I don't have that access now. But when I was in the wireless industry, yeah, I could literally get, pinpoint GPS locations, of anybody's whereabouts if I needed it. I could basically know all the phones and the numbers of the people that were near the device that I was researching. I could literally learn these things, guys, in a very easy to use database. And it would literally just basically, I could say into the database, okay, load mobile identification number, and I'd enter in the 10 digit, whatever the min. And then once I put that in, I would say, like, it's show me like in real time where that device is. And then basically I would get a real time map report within the engineering tool. And it would basically go and show me on a map. Boop, there's the person right there. And, this is exactly where they are. And here is everything around it. And so literally on the map, it would not just show me like what I had looked up. I could actually add layers of information to say, oh, okay, now that you showed me where min whatever is, let me see what other MINs are nearby, what other MZs are nearby. And then I can find out bloop, 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 bloop. I could find out a cluster, like how many are near that one phone. And I know you're saying like, well, what do you have access to those types of things for? Guys, it's real simple. Like when you're in the wireless industry, you have access to those tools to test, mostly for capacity reasons, and to where you can test with permission when you're like within a testing environment between two system performance engineers, it would be like a way for you to verify your device, another person's device. You can verify your GPS coordinates, make sure that things that are called LBS, location-based services, are functioning normal and proper. However, I became acutely aware that all of these things can be hacked. All of these things can be manipulated in ways that could even trick me in my former job, me in my former role, or even my peers today, currently. I do believe they could create falsified data sets that could actually make a person that's actually a very nice person, that's a really well meaning person, look very bad with digital forensics, not just through just false attributions or whatever of like data. For example, one way would be to like steal a person's internet connection to do something nefarious like money launder or transfer illicit files or buy drugs or something like that or whatever like that. And then you leave their IP address behind after doing all the nefarious things. Now the data association to all those activities has been muled on a patsy device or a patsy person's IP route, and the other person gets off, in the distance and whatever, right? And so I started to learn more about the doping of digital forensics in ways that they could actually trick engineers, ways that could actually trick me in my former role, things that I've actually been able to. I think if I was stuck inside the job still, I don't think that I would even thought about these things. I think I needed to like have the last 2 years doing in building things where I learned about how you could specifically tune things in, bring antennas into rooms or into specific environments, how to separate the signals from one antenna to another. Like I just learned so much about how to control radio frequency environments in such specific ways that when people began bringing information to me about weaponization of these systems in private environments, I was like, wow. When I did not do DAS work, I never even thought about it. I always thought people who would point the finger at towers were all crazy. Now I know that, well, look, I don't think that a lot of towers do things intentionally negative overall. I'm still kind of on the fence about what I believe there, guys. I know that when I was in the telecommunications industry, I was genuinely working to do things that would deliver a data signal that would, help a person make a phone call, and that was the only thing that I did. Okay. And I do believe that was true about the vast majority of my coworkers. We were there just to make it to where people could make a data session or a phone call. Um, if there are boutique industries of things that are involving like weaponization of antennas that are on towers and masts, I can promise you guys I am truly unaware of that. I don't get involved with things like that. I never have. And when people brought that information to my awareness, I would say, honestly, I come up with mostly dead ends when it comes to blaming things that are mounted on cell towers. And I believe that the reason why is that the only way you could get away with it is to take an existing telecommunications signal, portion off a certain allocation of a frequency band that would do something that would not be signal based. It would be, EMP weapon or pulse based or something that would not like deliver a communication signal. It would just deliver high amounts of energy with that frequency band to select targets on a tower by tower basis. Does that exist? Not that I've seen any documentation to support, but I did have intuitions or whatever that somebody could think of it, or that it could be something that is possible. And I could even think of how it could be done. And so I just don't want to let you guys to think that like I'm being cheeky there when it comes to that. It's just simply that I also know a lot about regulatory things and what it takes to file antennas and place things on antenna masts and broadcast the signal outbound, and how much that's monitored and watched. And so again, guys, you would have to have a pretty deep amount of corruption for it to come from towers. But then once I worked for a company that does do the tower signals like Verizon, but also does in building DAS, to deliver the same signals in. And all that means, guys, is that if the tower can't hit the inside of the building effectively, I'm sure you've all experienced this. You go into an elevator, it goes no service. You go into a basement, it says no service, or your service is so weak that you can't hear the person, or the data is really slow and it pisses you off. All right. When that happened, I was part of a team of people that would swoop in and investigate why do and very deep dive studies using blueprints of the building, and going through all the nooks and crannies of it, and being granted permission to do it. That's how I know so much. That's why I've basically been able to gain access to so much knowledge. I was the person assigned to these mini mall retail environments, oftentimes where the stores were. So sometimes like Verizon, for example, to offset capacity or whatever, all the stores do it, all the companies do it. They don't want like those phones that are inside the store. Sometimes there's like 30 phones going or 40 phones going. Then you have the employees' devices that are in their pockets and all the customers that come in. That basically makes it to where like one little area just goes. I mean, it just pulls like, you have to think of data traffic like as a swimming pool. It's not like even though it's offered to you unlimited, I can assure you when it comes to a resource on the tower, it is not unlimited. The more people in one area using it, the more it just sucks all the energy out of it, which is sort of like just taking all the water out of the swimming pool until everybody's like, hey, I came here to swim and that's all I got is just like, it's only coming up to my knees, man. What's the hell? That's kind of what it's like with data capacity relative to these networks. Okay. You have to keep enough water so that everybody can stay swimming in the pool basically, and then you keep having to add more layers, then more people jump in the pool and go like, I want to swim, I want to swim. So you have to make the pool wider and you have to make it deeper because it just, it starts to offset the water. Anyways, that's kind of how it is with capacity engineering. I always have to come up with something water based to talk about capacity. But all right. But so part of my role was effectively doing deep dive investigations of what was going on relative to that exact issue there, capacity. That's why those tools exist, not to be creepy and spy on all of you or anything else like that. It's just simply that, it's, how do I say, yeah, it's, anyways. Let me just get deep into this. All right. So I'm going to play an article on what is a Nike missile silo. How does this connect to some of the underground things that are going on, and that kind of thing. All right. But just to give you a clear understanding of it, like what I'm trying to introduce you to is the concept of that these silos have effectively been repurposed to do digital forensic hacking, digital forensic doping, tricking investigators, tricking anybody, whether it's law enforcement or somebody who's just spying on you, good reasons and bad reasons alike. I'm going to show you just some basics of how digital forensic doping works and why it would be used within trafficking things specifically. I was reluctant to do this mostly because I'm actually quite sympathetic to people that are doing something that isn't really harming anybody with this system. What do I mean by that? So a lot of these are just sort of like speakeasies and like, the similar to like underground opium dens that used to exist in Shanghai, environments like in Portland. There was all these places where it was like a saloon and a bar up on top. And then once if you knew the right person and you knew the secret password, you could go underground and then you had access to more than alcohol, or if alcohol was illegal where you were, underground is where you went to go drink and play cards and gamble and everything else like that, right? So most people are familiar that such a thing exists. They're called speakeasies. And Portland actually has a rich culture of speakeasies and underground underneath the building cultures. I mean, they have tours of it. Seattle also has tours of it. They're pretty open about their histories of Shanghai, which is stealing people and like white slavery. It's trading people. It's basically kidnapping people and stealing them and then selling them to somebody in another country or another whatever and everything like that as a slave, where they're basically, because they're in some foreign land and can't really like fend for themselves. Now suddenly they're beholden upon the slave owner. And hopefully, if they do their job right, they might make it back in 5 or 6 years to the United States. I mean, that was the story that I was told about how people got shanghaied. If they were lucky, they would basically just be a slave for several years, and then eventually somebody would take mercy on them and go, all right, here you go, and then just drop them off when the ship came back one time, or they would just escape whenever they came back for another round of the States or something. Again, kind of a weird story. But But you can find all the history of that, and there's like these Shanghai tunnels things involving Portland. You can actually see the video of the tour and the guy explaining all the stories about it. They even had these things where, you know, the people that weren't invited down there, they were tricked into going. They would just get them really drunk, push them back into a corner, you know, pull on this rope behind the bar, and then it was like a floor would drop out underneath them, and then they would fall onto a mattress or a stack of mattresses. And since the person was drunk or whatever, they basically would just then kind of drag their body onto the ship, and then now the ship would go off into the water, and then they would now be sold onto this is called Shanghai, and they would be sold into slavery. So yeah. All right, guys. So so I'm going to show you right now they're bots. That's why they're not real. They keep posting bogus bit.ly links, and it's not good for the channel. That's why I'm doing it. Otherwise, I just let it stay there, but they're not real. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw you some diagrams about how some of the ways the silos are set up. So basically, they're, you know, entrance here, it goes into an underground system. They're connected through a series of tunnels underground. And then the ones that I've been investigating for a while almost always have a way to tie both information between silos as well as routes of physical routes and bringing things from place to place. So they'll put these silos, they'll like one I found locally to where I'm currently at, they literally placed it's either an apartment or a condominium complex right above the entrance. Well, why would they do that? Why do you think? If there's tunnels that connect them to something else, nearly to all of them, that's why the apartment was built above the tunnel system. It's to provide the entrance underground, and then the person can go there and then go to a whole series of other places undetected. Where would they go? All right, this is where things get more challenging because you could live in one of those apartment complexes, right? And then if you have access to the building that's where it's like a shared situation and all these different people are in this unit, but they have like a false floor or a ladder or an elevator that's shared that's behind the closed doors that nobody else has access to, or like a false wall that basically somebody can just go boom, boom, and then people on like 3 floors of an apartment complex can all just go down a ladder or an elevator, usually like a ladder. I'm sure they're not that, you know, elaborate, but they can go down. And then once they're there, they're in the speakeasy entrance. Now they can go to a route that takes them to a mini mall, that takes them to the actual shopping center, that takes them to a business park nearby. And this also provides a way to have, you know, false attribution of your GPS coordinates from one route to another, and to be able to tie one location to another, make one building look like another GPS wise or geolocation wise. Okay. And so I'll give you a quick rundown of what these are. You'll get to see them here shortly. I'm going to put the video up. This is what a Nike missile silo is. So hang on. And I will be back in a bit.
Showing the proximity of some of these locations to Nike. For doing missile defense, and sorry guys, hang on. Seeing the diagrams here, they had good reasons to exist. They hopefully you can hear me better now. If you had audio issues, I'm surprised nobody did. All right, building off my last presentation. I have to hear what this sounded like when I play this back because I have no idea how you guys are hearing me properly. Hang on. Nike missile silos that have been all right, building off my last presentation, showing the proximity of some of these locations to Nike missile silos that have been repurposed or abandoned or sold off to private parties, and how they are in location to other areas in eastern Washington, Bothell, Washington, that are near some of these other areas. Without getting into too much detail, I'm just noticing patterns involving these facilities. They have a history in the United States for doing missile defense, and as you can see in the diagrams here, they had good reasons to exist. They had underground bunkers installed in them, which is interesting because if these things have been sold to private parties, and I think it's worth exploring, what has been done with them, who has them, are they expanding the tunnel systems that are already in use, that were already installed in these things? Because my understanding of these systems were that quite a few of them were tied together through pre-existing tunnel systems. So if those tunnel systems are still in existence, then are there potential exploits that are still there? If so, who's allowed to go through those tunnel systems and access them, and what might else be going on in tandem? I think these things are all worth exploring. So what I've done is I've just attached a series of slides that kind of show you, what things look like near the Hanford Nuclear Reservation in tandem with some of the hilltops and the wineries, Nike missile silos that are in that area in high proximity, like a lot more than other areas. And you can kind of see as you go through that in eastern Washington in particular, there's quite a number of them that cluster there around the Hanford Nuclear Reservation that are also close to a line that was drawn from 205 degrees while I was researching some wineries out in Kettle Falls, Washington, that had a landmark up there. Because the thing I've noticed about these groups is they have a tendency to leave landmarks that have arrows and things like that. So, just because I'm naturally curious and I know things about maps, I'll like scroll through and kind of see, where things lead. And that's kind of what brought me to some of this data was as I was exploring some of the groups that I'd researched in some of the previous material, I went out to wineries in Kettle Falls, and I noticed up on the hilltop, they'd clearly etched, or somebody, it seemed, had clearly etched an arrow that pointed at about 205 to 206 degrees, somewhere in that range. And so I just drew an anchor there and followed the line. And that's why I got curious, is because it went straight to Hanford Nuclear Reservation, right past this vineyard up there on the county line of Franklin and Grant. I know about these areas just because areas like Othello, Hanford Nuclear Reservation are areas near where I grew up. I went to school in Franklin County. So, it's a pretty rural area where not many people live. More people live there now than when I did back in the 80s. But yeah, it's not very heavily populated even to this day. So I just thought that was really kind of, I don't know, an interesting data correlation that there's so many of these Nike missile silos that have been sold off or potentially repurposed that could also potentially have tunnel systems that interconnect them. And in tandem with that, deep underground military bases that also tie them together. So Nike missile silos that have been sold off. We should know really who has access to them. So building on that, some of my previous research has discussed Bothell, Washington, and there are a couple more landmarks out there that I thought were pretty curious because there is a history of Nike missile silos there as well. I didn't realize this until later, but up on 228th in Bothell, Washington, where there's that FEMA Army facility, I noticed there's a landmark there, and I'll show you kind of a before and after. It looks like, this is what it looks like before, and then as I transition over, you can kind of see the landmarks. There's a lion's head. You can kind of see the way they etched the tail. You can see the feet, the paws. So it's something I kind of notice is that there tends to be these visual landmarks from above. It was almost like it was designed for pilots in the days before there was access to satellite imagery. So it's a consistent theme you'll find with a lot of these groups, landmarks. And since I'm a person that kind of studies satellite imagery because it was part of what I did for my work, was just finding cell tower locations in my past is part of what I did. It's just something that I kind of developed a natural ability for locating. And so again, it's just correlative data patterns that I think are interesting and that are worth sharing with people. And I just wanted to show you this and just kind of see what you thought. You can draw your own data correlations, but it's pretty curious. And yes, thank you for watching. And I'll have more on this later. Thanks. just want to talk a little bit about the Hanford Nuclear Reservation. This is Columbia Crest. Out here is kind of the middle of the Hanford Nuclear Reservation. It's kind of, I guess you could say, a Shangri-La of wineries. They're all over the place. And it's a pretty big industry out here. I actually know somebody that was offered a position out here. Yeah, that was connected to the reservation. How do people access underground facilities that are near Nike missile silos, Titan, Atlas? You need to look these things up, guys. Do you know where these missile bases are? Do you know where these silos are located? What are they being done with now? What do they use them for? Well, sometimes they put wineries above them because the facilities like the underground silos, they make for good facilities for winemaking. It's all the perfect, whatever. So it just winds up being, it works, right? Sometimes radar installations are used for that, abandoned bases that have just, underground bunkers for lots of reasons, for safety. And I'm very familiar with this area out here. I used to do network design out here. So towers and things like that, I used to, help cover out here the things as far as wireless coverage to keep people safe, to make sure that if, anybody ever needed help or whatever, they could get it. But after I left my career, I started learning things about wineries. I'm not saying about this one necessarily, but I will say, though, that a lot of things that I learned relative to wineries, I kind of learned a lot of them are owned by the same people. So you think that one company owns it, another company owns it, and then, they have mergers and acquisitions and things like that, but it's bigger than the wine. See, what happens underground caves, what happens in facilities underground with resonant frequencies, and how do they radiate upward? Why would it be important to manipulate energy underneath the crops? Well, I've actually discovered something called underground buried antenna. It's an old concept where they can actually accelerate growth. That would be something you'd want for like Christmas trees and things like that, right? On a seasonal scale, you'd want them to be a certain height pretty much every year, and for it to be a pretty predictable cycle. So that's one reason. But I'm out here in Patterson, though, and there's a lot of the underground activities that I know occur out here, guys, that are relevant to some of the cults, just so you know. And a lot of those cults practice some pretty esoteric things while pretending to be like LDS and Mormon. Be like, who, us? Sorry, guys. I mean, I was raised around a lot of you. I know better. That's all. And so when you do this little who, us, with the tithing and the distributed antenna system networks that I've been finding, not all you guys, but enough, then the wineries, which is alcohol. So I'm not sure about the morality of everything, but anyways, I'm not trying to be judgmental, guys. I'm just saying, I'm just saying there's something going on with these wineries out here, man. You know what I mean?
In today's episode of I'm Not Saying, Just Saying. Yeah, I'm a little bit different than I'm not just saying. I mean, I'm different, So can we agree, guys? I've got some pretty good credentials through which to judge these things on. And as far as investigating things, well, I guess you could say I've got way more access than the average person through the 2 years I spent as an in-building system performance engineer. Literally had access to hundreds of buildings. You know what? That would be an exaggeration, guys, but I'd say a couple hundred I probably did. Again, a lot of office buildings, malls, major malls in some cases of major areas and major towns, like Seattle, Portland area. I did a lot of walks of malls and underground basements and things of that nature behind the stores. I've seen the nooks and crannies of retail establishments. I've seen the ladders that go up and down into these levels. I've been on all their rooftops. I've been through the hatches. I know how you can get from one place to another by climbing up onto one roof hatch, going way over to one other place, and you can suddenly pop down into another spot just like that. I mean, I just know how all these things work. And again, maybe that's my problem. Half the thing is like, I've have so much experience when it comes to these things and understanding like the possibilities that I truly can conceive of quite a few ways to manipulate digital forensics. I don't want to ever do that for nefarious purposes. So I guess you could call this information in the spirit of what you would call an ethical hacker. I'm here just to explain to you things from an ethical hacker perspective of how things can be doped from a digital forensics perspective, and why organizations, well, hell, you know, I ain't gonna lie to you guys, I could use a job at the moment. I could use better employment opportunities, or at least a good contract or something of that nature to make money from. And so yes, I would be considering this, offering my services, so that you could understand just how much I can tell you about how maybe you might have got it wrong once or twice, or if you're a person who might have been accused of something that you know you didn't do, I might be a person that could explain how you could have been set up. So that's something that, yeah, I mean, I can tell you that right now in our current environment, there's been so much fakery and there's been so much setting people up or whatever. I think that there's people that are in the false justice system, the doped data information system, that would just prefer that my information never see the light of day. Because now it's again for good reasons and bad reasons, guys. I think the bad reasons why would be because there's a lot of people that realize they got it wrong and they're trying to cover it up, or they consciously got it wrong, or they consciously manipulated some digital forensics, and they don't want to get, you know, have anybody with my level of knowledge say, you understand that there's quite a few ways that the person could do that. Well, what would be the good reasons why somebody wouldn't want me to discuss these things? Well, because then it gives somebody some ideas. And so I understand, Touche, why some people might be a little bit like, dude, are you sure you should say these things or even talk about them? I think when it comes to this, yeah, I think the time to do that is now. And I apologize to folks that use this in ways that don't really harm anybody. And I think that some of you just have ways of accessing underground facilities for privacy. You just want to have ways to meet people for all kinds of reasons. I mean, I think it could just be because some people just be like, yes, we need to have a meeting in private and we absolutely cannot have anybody see us. Hence, a person goes into location A, a person goes into location B. These things are a few blocks away from each other. They did not physically go into the same location, yet underground, they can now physically be in the same location. Above ground, their GPS is still referenced to where they were last above ground. Yet now they can go underground, be together until whatever situation, and then reemerge above ground with all of their digital forensics being assigned to the locations they were previously at. And that's extremely easy to do. Extremely easy. It would even be easy to make it to where once the people go underground, to now sim, to clone their sim and actually have a person that like could actually go create a route, a falsified route, to actually throw somebody off. Like, I'm just telling you guys, I could even come up with creative ways just to hide a person's location and whereabouts. I mean, good, bad, or indifferent, these are all ways this information could be used. Yeah, clever ways of just saying like, this is how somebody could actually physically hide, like, you know, where they've been for a amount of time. I mean, it's a clever way of doing it. It's a clever way of, distributing drugs, of doing trafficking operations where you would like to deliver the product or the person or whatever the situation is to one location, but not have where they're going to meet the other person or where the product is going to be delivered to the other person, depending on which it is. You don't want it to be attributed. You don't want these two things to synchronize within a database. And these are all the ways that these types of digital forensics can be done. Again, I do think that the vast majority of these types of ways of doping digital forensics, this is where I'm really tortured, guys, with this personally. Like, as far as like, as far as like my decision-making process, don't like to use that word, but where I like, I was really at odds with whether or not I should discuss it in more detail. And look, guys, there's a lot of different ways that you can go about doing these types of things if you're a person who's not harming anybody. The problem is that because so many people don't want to do anything about the more nefarious things, it's just become a wild, wild west of activity. So again, meeting someone in private, I don't have any problems with that, even if it wouldn't necessarily benefit me. I don't necessarily care. I think those things should exist. I don't really even have a problem with those people wanting their secret kept. I honestly believe, like, and I kind of like would like it for there to be ways to fool all the ways that privacy can be removed. And so I'm glad in some ways that this ominous system of tracking everything, everywhere, every place is fallible. But the purpose of what I'm telling you today, it's not to give you ideas. It's just so that you understand that it is extremely fallible, it is extremely foolable, it is extremely dopeable, it is extremely easy in ways that most people don't even think to do, to make one thing look like another for good reasons or bad reasons. How do I know this? I'm just going to tell you guys, well, look, let's get some, I'm going to start putting up a whiteboard, I think. And let me just show you something really quick here about, I'll show you a quick diagram about the underground things, and then I'll get into the whiteboard discussion. So let me stop that, start this. Here we go. All right. Hopefully you can see this diagram. Yeah, there it is. Okay. All right, so this is an actual diagram of one here. And so you can see there's the launch silo. You can see that these missiles were huge. I mean, they were enormous missiles, and they had multiple different spots and tunnels that connected them, showing you like what's underground here. You can see they had living places, control centers, places where people could go up and down, powerhouse systems, control center again, you know. And what you see here on this map that's on the screen is that's just one short list. Well, look, it's not comprehensive. I'm just letting you know, maybe it's not a short list, but this is just one database that I have of a multitude of different Nike, Titan, and Atlas missile silos. I have another one that has even more listed on it. And some of these are in like Europe and other parts of the world even. Okay. And then another diagram to show you here. Hang on. This, again, not quite as good of a resolution, but you can kind of get a better idea of what kind of things they had in here. You can see again, it's low resolution, but there's a sleeping quarters. You know, they had different rooms, control centers, multiple levels within some of these pods, tunnel systems that connected it up to these, you know, things, air filtration systems, all of it was in there. And again, it's kind of hard to think about, like, did these things exist? You know, Gabe, are these things real? Or are you sure you're not just showing us some diagram or whatever? I get, guys, I don't have to like fool you into thinking these things or whatever, but I can show you. Where is that link that I had? If I remember correctly, here at the bottom, I think I have an article that yeah, there it is. I said, do they really exist? I provided maps and databases, and here is one of many clips you can find giving a tour of a privately owned former missile silo like Titan, Atlas, and Nike, among others. These are for sale all over if buyers can afford to renovate and modernize. So, abandoned Titan missile silo base tour. I don't want, you know, I didn't get permission from this person to play this, but it's just a link that I gave people so they could actually see this, the physical reality of it, so that, you know, these are real things. It's not a video game. That's an actual camera I think she's like the daughter of the owner or something like that. And this was like a channel that she put on to like, you know, show everybody what these facilities looked like and took them on these large tours. So that map I just showed you of like, you know, the silo entrance and the large, you know, staircase that spirals into where the things that surrounded it, like this would just be one of those entrances. And so they have one of those vast ones that has all the different command center, the sleeping quarters and everything else like that. And I do believe that this channel was created to help them sell it. So, you know, just to help give you guys, because I don't see this material very frequently. I don't see people like showing you that, yeah, it's not just like that somebody made the story up and everything else like that. That's an actual thing. Okay. There's one that, you know, again, that's kind of done very nonchalantly, like, hey, here's an underground base. Check it out. Kind of strange, right? So there's that. And then, you know, there's all kinds of like things going on with these systems that connect the silos, people that are like close to the Love family cult, the Church of Jesus Christ at Armageddon, their connection to wineries. This is all part of my research. So this is to help kind of fill in the gaps on people who wonder like what else might be hidden in modern day times by these groups. Like what is it that they're really hiding? Well, they're hiding, guys, like all the different ways of trafficking things. It's just helping people hide it better. And so again, you know, a lot of the folks that are doing this, if you're a person that has something to hide, you're going to be considered a hero. But what you don't seem to understand, guys, is that, you know, it's also supporting these other darker economies that involve child exploitation, the distribution of child pornography, to be blunt, the trafficking of children, things of that nature. And so when these routes are oftentimes exploited for those types of activities, and because the secrecy is being held on all the other things, people will look the other way at the child exploitation. They look the other way at the child trafficking. They're constantly looking the other way at the darker activities because they're having too much fun getting away with things with this system. They're getting away with the buying and selling of drugs, of guns, of having their little private meeting rooms to have various things going on. I mean, good and bad and indifferent, guys. I mean, I understand why people would want those things. And I actually respect why people would want the privacy. I do. And I'm sorry to those of you that like kind of think of me as like a party pooper, I guess you could say, or somebody that just doesn't like get it or something like that. But, you know, if nobody talks about it, then we can't develop some degree of like jurisdictional, like how do you control the activities when they start to get dark and they might get a little bit out of control. And people who want to have their ways of getting away with things underground, they don't want to see the child exploitation or have the knowledge that even if they're not witnessing it, that it's happening near them. They don't want that going on, but they don't really have a say because they're not supposed to be there either. So you understand what we're going through here, guys. It's just like all these bizarre things that are going with these underground silos, the concealing of the activities, the routes that connect them all together. And there's so many tunnels. I cannot begin to tell you. So this is just one clip that I have out of many. It doesn't have any audio to it. So I'm not actually, I could play audio if I could turn that up because it doesn't matter. But this was just one clip that I did that doesn't have any audio, so that people could just see like just the way that all of it ties together. The number of wineries, the way the wineries act as waypoints, the waypoints aim at these other Nike missile silos and major hilltops. There does appear to be something that ties a lot of it underground and connects it all together that goes back just decades and decades before the mostly during the Cold War era. But these things are being built basically, you know, allegedly to protect us from the Russians mostly. And again, guys, you know, that's when you start getting into the whole idea of, you know, who was in the United States that really held such a grudge against the Russians. I mean, did America have that big of a problem with the Russians until we had the Nazis here side by side with us after Operation Paperclip? That would be the thing that I would find super interesting to learn. What is the actual true behind the scenes, like what got us into the greater conflict when you really drill down past all the false history? And again, guys, if we were able to ally to defeat the Nazis to some degree, or at least find people in Russia that we could ally with to defeat the Nazis, I should tell you something, that we literally had a time where I believe it was Roosevelt and his wife hosted what was her name, Pavlichenko, and she was a sniper in the Russian military that actually had over 300, if I remember correctly, she had over 300 Nazi kills on her kill list from being a sniper in the Soviet military. And so at least at that time, America said, well, they may have a different way of doing things and of governance, but we can at least agree upon this or whatever to defeat the Nazis, right? And so if you guys know anything about that part, I didn't really ever understand, guys, because we don't really get a lot of exposure to the Russian part of it. But like, at least I didn't when I was growing up. It was mostly just I learned about, the things involving the Jews and the Nazis in Nazi Germany and them having to hide and everything else like that, but not learning much about the other, the histories and things like that that were close to it. And so there is a vendetta that the Nazis have had against the Russians, because effectively the Russians really kicked their ass militarily when it came to the actual, gun-to-gun fight. The Soviets at the time, the Russians and the Soviets, just had more. They had more to what they were doing. They they could achieve more. They could beat the Nazis. They were tougher. But the Russians spoke very explicitly. Something that I had never even seen was just the horrific stories that I won't even repeat, guys. I don't even like saying the things that I did earlier about the activities going on, but it's basically like the Russians, like Pavlichenko, if you ever watch any stories about her, she'll tell you some, like, from her own words and everything, when they like quote her, she had some horrific stories of things that she had witnessed about the atrocities the Nazis committed. I mean, they would raid towns, and they were quite literally, there's no other way to put it, raping and pillaging. They were taking whatever they wanted to. They were modern day pirates. They seemed, and she basically discussed that they took very sadistic pleasure in torturing people. They didn't just go in there and shoot things. Like, they wanted for people to remember them. They wanted, like, the death nearly to be anchored in the memory. They wanted these people to be deeply traumatized and see the swastika. They wanted them to be deeply traumatized and witness the symbols constantly in front of them. And I really learned about why they did that. The Nazis are really into anchoring symbols with trauma energy. They understand the whole thing I've talked about involving bioenergetics, plasma relative to how it anchors to information. It's why, if you really study what they did with symbols like the swastika, the Nazis don't own the swastika, but they've effectively redefined it completely in everybody's modern conception of what it is. If you now see a swastika, you immediately draw, most people, not everybody, this is a more sophisticated audience, but swastika equals bad Nazi racist to most people, even though Native Americans use it as a symbol. All these things go back, for Indians from India. Like, I mean, regardless of where you go, it's in China, it's in India, it's in Germanic societies. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter how far back you go, hundreds and hundreds of years, that symbol has been in use. So what the Nazis have truly mastered is taking something from another culture or another group of person, turning it into another definition, changing its meaning, anchoring that with trauma, and getting that into the collective consciousness through bioenergetic mass resonance manipulation. Broad exercises in anchoring symbols that deeply traumatize. So yeah, going to war and then changing something that was a healing energy, a good symbol involving good luck and wellness, the swastika, and then turning into the complete opposite meaning: death, destruction, death camps, Auschwitz, extermination of people. I mean, literally always taking something that's pleasant and good and literally just going whoosh and going 180 on the negative definitions. Okay. So, getting deeper into this then so that you understand, like, you know, where I'm going with this. I do think that it was the Nazis within America, the Operation Paperclip interests. If you think about it, it was Werner von Braun. He was the one that really got the modern rocket fuel, modern missile program really off its feet. And he was Nazi SS. This country completely forgets, like, it's going out of style. Like, this is how good Nazis are at making you forget history and where they are and who they are, and when they're especially right in front of you. They are masters at this. And von Braun, especially, and all of his cohorts from Operation Paperclip really truly pulled the wool over the general general public's eyes when it came to what they are and who they are. Now, the military, I don't think was under any, it wasn't a secret what they were. They understood they were Nazis. So there was obviously people in America that were waiting for Nazis to appear here. And now we have all of this that we see. The underground tunnel networks. Again, guys, study the Nazis. You'll understand that they were very much into this whole thing of networking things underground, building underground tunnel systems. Not the only culture and not the first one. But one thing I can tell you is they were super into creating those tunnels and stealing them from other people. And this is, again, this is where the more esoteric information that you hear is absolutely true, I believe. There does appear to be like a war that is going on to effectively hijack these places constantly from one group to the other underground. Some get destroyed in the process, probably for good reason, and others get just simply repurposed and stolen and hijacked and taken, like, capture the flag. Okay. So, yeah, guys, yeah. So again, I'm not, just so you understand, guys, like what I just told you about the whole thing involving Nazis and the Russians, it's just simply to put some context in what we're experiencing nowadays. So if you think about what I'm telling you involving everything else like that, I'm not going to talk about the news cycle, but just to help you understand and contextualize my data. I've just learned that there are people that are close to me that I do think have Nazi interests, and I do think have vendettas against the Russians, and the Russians are aware of their Nazi interests, and that's part of the reasons why they perhaps aren't welcome in Russia. Best thing that I can say. And if you've watched my material, you'll know that I actually have a relative that's banned from Russia, blacklisted. Okay, just to be real with you. And again, I have relatives that have been in Department of Justice, Department of Energy, all kinds of different government functions, but those are just some of the more high-ranking ones. National Security Directorate, I learned my brother just left. Those of you who haven't heard the news, yes, I should update you on that. No, he's not there any longer. He left that position a while ago, I learned. So I just didn't have access to his LinkedIn profile. I wasn't checking on it regularly. So, but yeah, he's at a different place. But yeah, I mean, so again, I've had family that have been close to a lot of the infrastructure. So, again, remember, I've always been close to it as far as living on top of it. Family members that are close to the Department of Energy. My father moved us to Nevada right at the same time. The whole reason we were there is because of Yucca Mountain. Yucca Mountain is a deep, 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 deep tunnel that goes underground. Very deep. Okay. I mean, this is something that was designed to store nuclear waste in a place where nobody would be able to be harmed by it, way the hell underground in the Earth's core. That was its original function. So they've spent, well, hell, if I graduated from high school when the thing was being built or in the process of being discussed or whatever, right, back then, and that's why I was living there. Can you imagine? Look at this, guys. Do I look like I just graduated from high school? Hell no. All right. So think about that. I was still like, what? I think I lived there when I was like 17. Wow. Yeah. Till I was 19. So, and that's why we lived there when I was that age. All right. Yucca Mountain Repository, deep underground base. with tunnels that are drilled and bored all over the place. So yeah, I know things, folks. I mean, have I been in these places? No, I haven't been in that one. I haven't been in Yucca Mountain, but I've been in things for my work function. I have been in some of the things that are close to where I grew up. I was actually inside one of the facilities that was above ground from the place that was above the place that was below. So again, twice I've been in those facilities, and one that were close to the Bothell, Washington facility. And then I just have some bizarre memory of being inside it from when I was really, really, really young. And it's a very vague memory. But again, it's just all I see is the tube and going through it. That's it. It's like the most blip of a memory. It's hardly anything. I don't even know if it's authentic. It's just something that I have this vague memory of, and I'm not even sure which tunnel this is, or if it's a thing, or if it was just some dream, you know. But I do think there's a good reason to think that it's an actual thing, simply just because we were right above it. You know, again, there's a lot of things that I remember very, very well. Some things I have these bizarre like gaps in my memory, and then suddenly, you know, I go, oh, whoa, now I get it. Okay, yeah. Okay, now I remember from when I was a kid during that age. And yeah, in that neighborhood that's above the Nike missile silo, I can tell you that it was a bit of a den for child abuse. There were people that just knew consciously that that neighborhood was kind of a wild, wild west for child abuse. And that if you were a kid that was getting abused by a relative or somebody in that neighborhood, and you tried to tell somebody like a neighbor next door, this neighborhood was designed, if you ask me, based on my experience in it, it was really kind of just set up to where if you go and run across and go like, you know, neighbor, friend of my kid, you know, parents of my friend, will you please help me? I'm 5 and I'm being abused. Well, you're just going to another place where they let their kids get abused. A lot of them were adopted in this neighborhood. So I'm just telling you guys, like, it was just normalized to them that they were going to get abused. A lot of the kids just sort of accepted the culture as a culture. They didn't even think, I think, in many cases. They were trained in many cases to believe that it wasn't even abuse. It was literally like an MK Ultra type thing, if you ask me. It was being trained and ingrained in them to just sort of normalize some pretty dark activities to where they would grow up and eventually kind of go like, is that even weird? Should I even say something? Yeah. I mean, if you're seeing the kind of things that I'm talking about, and I would say somebody's kind of like tricked you into sort of saying that you should look the other way. No, please wake up from that. This ain't normal, and it's not supposed to be happening. And what we really just need are just a handful of people that are still going back and forth between these places just to come out and say like, yes, they exist. Here's where they are. I'm ready to talk. Because tonight, once this is done, you're going to understand when I draw these diagrams and show you what I know, no one's going to be able to deny these things are what they are. Okay? You just can't. Getting to that. How does it all work? All right. So I'm going to talk to you about how these silos tie together. And I'm going to show you an example. Like today, I discovered another one that I think is, look, I don't ever definitively know because I can't get inside. But I can see the ecosystem based on the way they line up the silo to the silo, the types of things that are in the mini malls within the shopping centers, the types of businesses. Some are like gray area shady. For example, places that, look, guys, you know how it is. Some of those places kind of imply that they're giving like a straightforward, quote, massage or whatever else like that, but are doing something else. Or they say that it's a place where a person can have a hot tub for a half hour. Well, they're probably not being rented just for a hot tub visit. There's probably something else going on in the hot tub. I mean, that's all I'm saying. So, you know, it's things like that they have to have a way for a person to sort of like be able to launder their geo-referencing and get away with going to a place like that, but looking like they were someplace else. And so the silo system can be set up effectively to achieve this. And again, guys, I'm not trying to narc anybody out that just needs to do this for whatever good reasons are. This is only because the problem is, guys, there's child exploitation things that are going on. There's literally the environments that involve child abuse that are going on. And so those of you who are just trying to party with other consenting adults, I'm really sorry, okay? And again, guys, I genuinely am. again, even if I was a person that was like you're like the benefactor of said whatever, and I'm not. I'm just saying, I don't mean it like that. I just mean to say like I'm not like it's not like I'm saying this as an apology because I somehow like I'm a person that benefits from it. I don't. I mean, it's that I understand why people of considerable resources would want to have this system for things that don't involve hurting children. And everything else, honestly, guys, if you just want a place to go do drugs, if you just want a place to go have sex with somebody, then you don't want people above to know and it's another consenting adult. Those are all things that I guess I understand. I mean, I don't really, again, I'm not really a narc in that sense. But see, the people that I think that have been tipping me off to how everything works and showing me and giving me the information from a distance and using more creative ways of giving me the tips, they are I think mostly like-minded in this sense. Like they don't know what to do either. Like, how do we get this to the right people in the right places to say, like, this is why you can't just brush it all away as conspiracy theory, but I don't think you should just go running around raiding everything and trying to like knock it all down and terrorize everybody or whatever. I think what we need to find here is a balance of allowable sin. I don't mind it even in my own whatever. Like, you know, I feel like that's just the way people learn. You know, people like the way you figure out that you don't want to abuse drugs is sometimes you have some bad experiences with them. And then once you're allowed to have those bad experiences with them, you kind of go like, wow, that was dumb. And I think I want to be a more responsible person and not do that anymore. Or hell, maybe you wind up loving them and I don't know. What I mean to say though is I still think that people should just simply be allowed to like make mistakes and experience life organically. And I really do get concerned at this modern culture of quick information, geo-referencing everything everywhere every time robs people of not only their privacy, but just their ability to make mistakes without something just breathing down their neck every 5 seconds. I don't even like it when I feel like it's like me or whatever. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't want to benefit from it. I don't want to be the person that gets the information. I don't want somebody telling me constantly something that's geo-referenced to this place or that this lines up with that because I'm too conscious and aware of how you can fake it. I'm too conscious and aware of how much people would want me to like perceive something incorrectly to damage my relationships with people. So I know how things get hacked. I'm just sick of the trolling. I'm tired of people being like, well, look, you know, I'm like, yeah, whatever. I don't care. Because I just know too much about how malleable that reality is. You may believe it. Maybe it's true. I don't know. But I don't really care if that's the only way you're finding out. That's all. So just, I don't care. Don't tell me. Because I don't trust digital forensics. I've seen how they can be doped for good reasons and bad reasons alike. I don't want the information by and large. Now, if you want me to review it, then show you all the different ways that it can be fake because you just believe it. No. That person's phone has a GPS chip in it, and it said they were at this coordinate at this place at this time. Now I got this other thing that says this GPS coordinate lines up with this other thing at this time. This equals this. You know something? 99% of the time, you're right. It probably does equal that. But if you're going to be doing things that are like way, way more serious involving how you correlate those data points, you should at least take into consideration all the ways they can be fake to make a really good, decent, honorable person look bad. Or a person that has completely good and innocent intentions, make them look like they're doing something that they're not really doing. And then trying to pass that off as reality to another person. And I can especially see somebody trying to dope digital forensics when it came to trying to trick me because they would want me to draw negative associations based on things that were from my work history that I would just immediately trust. And I don't do that. I don't do that because of the last 2 years I had in the wireless industry. Now I'm going to get into the visual presentation. Okay. This is where you're going to see like how you can really, how do I say this, guys? You really can, do some significant spoofing of georeferencing with GPS, like fiber optics and GPS fiber optic amplifiers and distributed antenna systems, fiber optic repeaters that can translate GPS signals into fiber that runs over light, can be translated over to another location where it's reinterpreted as the message into a box that's physically located someplace else completely. But the boost of the fiber optic can be miles apart or hundreds of feet apart, meaning to say that you can make it look like the GPS is like a person standing on a street corner here. And then you can run a GPS cable long enough to where it goes like clear across the street and maybe even like another building over, and then place the unit like in the stairs there. So when a person goes into that building, it actually looks like they're in a building around the corner. I mean, that's the kind of things that I got exposed to within the wireless industry that I didn't even know existed. I'm like, wow, I didn't think a GPS signal could be boosted that far. Because sometimes I was the person that had to install the boosting of the GPS cord, guys. I'm telling you, I know this. Like, I've had to find the creative solutions to boosting GPS. Got it? So I know a lot more than average about this thing I'm telling you. All right, so let me get a different camera up, and I'm going to show you about how these things operate. I really don't remember the names of the units and the companies that made them because it's been too long since I did this, guys. The last time I dealt with this repeater, the GPS repeater, they may have come up with something way more sophisticated and works better now because it's been like several years. They always come up with new innovations, but there was like a GPS. It translated, it took like, so say you had a GPS cord that was not long enough to make it to where you needed it to be, like upstairs or something from your basement. This thing would just boost it over fiber optic and plug it into whatever. But there is ways that you can use this to basically take that GPS coordinate and then export it to something else entirely in ways that would trick most people, I think, that would be doing digital forensics. They would actually believe that a person was there. So hang on really quick, and I'll start getting into the whole diagram portion. All right. All right. So what I have, this is, I'm going to do this all over again. I just did this really quick so I'd have something to show you the quick diagram. But basically what you have here is the above ground, and I'll show you how it would like all connect below ground, right? So effectively CS would be a Nike missile silo hatch, this right here. Okay. Hang on. Yeah. Okay, good. All right. Just want to make sure it wasn't backwards. Last time I did this, the image wound up backwards because it had my settings correct. All right. So this will be a Nike silo. Okay. And this is called CS, and there's the hatch. And then this one over here is called LS. Now, what these things are is underground. You would have some degree of like, tunnel. Some kind of tunnel underground that would connect the two hatches. Okay. Now, then, because these were built like decades ago before there was all the development and housing and everything else like that, you got to think of it like back then, this apartment didn't exist, this shopping mall didn't exist, this business didn't exist here. You really just had out in the middle of this field someplace, this hatch. This mall wasn't there. None of this was there back in the 60s or the 50s or whenever these things were actually built or decommissioned even. Okay. And so the mall would get built on top, and then all the commerce would begin afterwards. And you get like mini malls that get built close to the main mall. You get the business buildings or whatever, right? And the apartments. Then you start getting people thinking of creative ways to tie their real estate into the underground economies because they want to have places where they can all meet together. So yeah, you might get an apartment complex where they go, well, once you get to level 1, rather basement rather, you've got a special floor, and then maybe like an apartment, you know, like here that's got a connected, you know, fake wall or something like that. They could also get into the hatch, right? And then people could enter into the apartment. And again, now you have a new route built in. Then the mall and everything underneath it, then they start going, well, you know, let's just make this like one great big area and expand like an already existing like silo system. And then, you know, underground, it just starts to become its own facility and city. Everything in red is the underground here. And then suddenly they go like, yeah, let's build another, you know, entrance in from the apartment complex. Then you get units that could all have, maybe on one side, there's a whole bunch of corner units that have access through something in the corner that takes you into the tunnel system. And that's the entrance. They could have a whole, you know, 2 different entrances there, right? And then here is like a mini mall, right? Where you have like, you know, like insurance clinics, like salons, delis, that kind of thing. And what they'll do basically is they'll blend like something that's a little bit gray area and shady, you know, with like things that are like super legitimate. So, you know, you might have something that's sort of like in a gray area, like, I don't know, like in Oregon, maybe it'll be like a marijuana dispensary that might be in this one, but they'll try to place it next to, you know, a deli, an insurance clinic, and whatever else like that. I don't want to say this about the marijuana clinics, guys, because I don't think that they're necessarily doing anything bad. So how about just someplace that's like a little bit more whatever, because Oregon's kind of accepted that you can do that, but maybe in an area where it's not quite as accepted, they might develop other economies. You don't usually find people selling drugs out of the side of marijuana dispensaries, mostly like other things besides cannabis, because cannabis by itself is already pretty profitable, so they don't really have to do other things. But I would say that maybe things that are a little bit more gray area, they might have a system that would be connected to, you know, something like this. And then I'll get deeper into how this would all connect to, but again, you would have a store that would be at least 1 or 2 of these shops would it be connected to a system that would go underground. And now you'd have another tunnel that goes in to the master system that's underground. Okay. All right. So now that, well, let me just move the whiteboard a little bit. So again, with all these places, what you can be doing is a person could go into, for example, a person could go into this apartment complex and then get a route into the mini mall. They could go into the apartment complex, get a route into one of the hatches that goes up into this. They could go into the apartment and then wind up in this business park in one of these floors or something like that. Again, guys, there's now ways where you can suddenly be someplace that normally would require somebody visually see you go from here on a physical sidewalk over to here. you could pretend to be in here for an indefinite amount of time, but actually be here, here, here in the mall, you know, anywhere within this area where the underground facility ties into another location. Add in if they've had like high speed, like rail type things underneath here, like where they can link this one pod area of like a facility like this to like another one that exists across town that does the same thing and has a similar series of connections. Yeah. Then you would have like, you know, underground rail and everything else like that that's doing these types of things as well, right? So this system that you're seeing here, I guess the reason why I got a little bit bothered by it was I kind of noticed that one of the cases that I was reviewing recently, there's just too many things with the kids, you guys. That's the part that pisses me off. Like if it was just people that were doing things between consenting adults or doing drugs or whatever, that would be fine. But I'm seeing all the signs of people trying to like launder or blend in legitimate children's activities with things that look like they're closer to a trafficking economy. So like putting like one of these entrances, for example, close to like a big like facility would be like a children's hospital or a pediatric clinic. Or a daycare. All right, now, guys, now you understand why I'm bothered, hopefully. Because it's one thing when it's like somebody that like wants to buy drugs or, you know, maybe have a private meeting with somebody in a covert way. And it's one thing if maybe some business partners want to meet privately and not have anybody know about something that they're doing by having this system or whatever. Like, guys, everything here, if you're buying guns, drugs, sex, and it's between consenting adults, you know, that's your all's business. I mean, I'm not trying to get, I'm not trying to piss you off. Just being real with you, okay? It's when we start getting to these types of systems that are close to these types of systems that I go, where are all of you when this is happening? Where are all of you who are having your fun here? Why are you looking the other way when you know that what they're doing with this is just finding a way just to where you guys don't see it, but it goes into a similar Now, I know what you're saying, guys. Big deal, right? Big deal. What's the problem here, guys? Well, because if you're a sex offender that's not allowed to live near a school or a daycare or a pediatric clinic or something like that, you have to be away from children all the time. It's a way to get the children close to them and they can be inside their place and look like they're not doing anything. They can get visits from their parole officers and everything. If it's a secure building, especially, yeah. And it's basically a way for them to create sort of like compounds where people that are sex offenders and people that exploit children to sort of get away with their activities. They create safe environments where they can bring in as an economy by blending into clinics that are like daycares, pediatric clinics, a specialty office for like children's dental care, for example, might be one example. I don't know. Those are the kind of things that they can do with these tunnel systems to basically launder the activities of people that may want to access the children in this building and then tying them to a group of people that normally wouldn't, you know, the ability to forensically associate a sex offender from one of these buildings where they're forced to live relative to the children that are in one of these places. It's a way to like to where they don't have to be brought into the front door where there's security cameras and keep people keeping an eye on them. That the activities go on underground, they link underground. And so what's gone on here, guys, is increasingly these types of scenarios, they start to like, you know, do this a little bit and then start to close them off more, or they limit the access and they make, you know, gatekeepers or whatever here and things like that to some of these other systems. But people that are doing these things like the drugs or the sex things or whatever else like that, that aren't trying to hurt anybody, they've become aware of these types of things that have been developed to basically give safe havens for predators and sex offenders, guys. And that's the best thing that I can tell you. Like, I don't want to be the person, I'm not trying to be the person that is, does this material for like shock value and to do things for whatever. It's just to basically say like, how do we find this happy balance between, I understand, guys, like, I don't know, man. I guess I'm the kind of person, like, I don't want to be in the FBI, so I don't want that job. And I don't want to be anybody's like moral gatekeeper. But at the same time, the one thing I think that almost all people in civil society agree upon is that you should not harm children. You should not exploit children, and they should never be in environments, or there should never be allowable environments through which any harm can come to children in ways that are nearly undetectable or where they can't receive help. And the problem I think that we have with this system here, folks, is that because the secret's being kept and and there's nothing but people interested in keeping it. I mean, I'm really kind of like the person that they all freaking hate at this point. I think for quite a few of them, I think a lot would like this to be known. So I guess all I'm trying to say to you is, now that you know that the secret's out a little bit and there's at least some people that know what's going on and how it's working, can we at least agree that it's up? You can't conceal it any longer. I'll actually prove to people how these things exist and everything else like that. And I can actually show, I don't really want to show real life examples, guys, because I feel like that should be something people are just out investigating on their own. And again, I don't know which ones are doing things that aren't harming anybody, and entirely, and which ones are clearly tied into things that involve child exploitation. All I'm telling you guys is that if you just want to do like things that involve guns, drugs, sex, drugs, and rock and roll and guns are none of my business, and I don't care. And all you people that have that going on with you, you just do you. None of those things are my business, honestly. But I am happy to partner with anybody from any general area for the most part, within reason. Informationally, I should say. I'm not looking for partners in the classic sense, but I'm simply willing to give information or provide gateways or bridges of information, if you will, to help people, I guess, understand the problem better, so that you don't think that it's all conspiracy theory about what's going on underneath, because people only tell you stories about wars and that there's aliens down there. And again, guys, some of the people that I've even like repeated some of the other information by will even tell you things like the alien stories, or they'll tell you things like the insectoids. And guys, I don't know. I mean, I don't personally believe in those things. I've never seen it. I'm prepared to believe in things like that. I've seen some really, really insane things. Yes, I have, but no, nothing like that. And so I think a lot of that is cover for all these other things. I think that they will pretend to talk about underground aliens when they really are talking about, people of a certain variety. They'll pretend to talk about, Mars when it really is about underground bases, not anything to do with space. That's a really common one, guys. A lot of times they'll just talk about how there's all these things going on the red planet Mars. They're not even talking about Mars. A lot of the people that do stories on YouTube that are conspiracy in nature, and you're going, are you sure you're talking about Mars? You really kind of sound like you're speaking in code about something else. Yeah, they are. They're talking about things going on underground. So usually when they say Mars, I think I've learned, at least in my case, no. I have this one phraseology that I've used, honestly, guys. That says Mars home will allow awake, and maybe that's what this is. Helping people understand how this all works will allow a greater awakening, I hope. But I just want us to find a happy balance, guys, between those of you who want to have this degree of allowable sin, look, I'm not in disagreement. I'm just not. I think it's fine. I think everything else that's not human trafficking, that does not have to do with child exploitation, as long as it involves consenting adults and everybody is of their own free will, I got zero problems with everything that's going on. Honestly, I honestly don't care. It's none of my freaking business. But we have to come to some agreements on what's going on with these things. They're tying them into schools, daycares, the creepy things they're doing with surveillance cameras relative to these things. It's pretty bizarre, the kind of esoteric things these people are doing with technology and the exploitation of children, that I don't think that you're entirely aware of all the mechanisms of how they work and why these people are interested in doing them. And then I have to be that guy that tells you these things that you don't want to hear. And I'm sorry. But there's technology explanations to some of the bizarre things that these people do. There's a reason why they want to have control over some of these environments, why it's important for them to have so much real estate. Eventually, for these people, I've learned, I think you're going to find this is true nearly everywhere with this current, whatever is going on with the tragic dismantling of our country and destabilization of our economy. All the groups that have the money are just, they don't care. Money is like nothing to them now. They know with cryptocurrency rigging, they can translate dollars into crypto and then back to dollars and just 10 times it, 100 times it over and over and over again until they don't even know what to do with it. It's that easy. Once you get a certain amount of money, you can multiply it. And then after that, it's just a matter of how do you hide it? How do you keep people from knowing that you have it? Hence this system. Because everything I've just shown you there relative to how this all works, these aren't just tunnel systems. They're doped information underground routes where, you know, there are things that information systems can travel through, fiber optic routes that tie one building to another, where you can have servers that are connected, where people can go into these buildings, you know, do things with information. And then in a private environment using radio frequency that's not accessible to the outside, meaning to say private servers, if they want to do financial transactions, money laundering relative to Bitcoin and other types of cryptocurrencies. Again, sometimes all somebody's doing is like, they just want to hide money they have. I don't really care. They just want to, I don't know, wash a financial transaction to where like maybe they wanted to see somebody in a hotel, but they couldn't do that. So they just find another way to meet that person in one of these facilities. They get all of the GPS referencing. They get all of the things that show that they were there. Again, these are all just ways that people can do things that can, these are ways you can get away with a crime. These are things you can do as simple as just getting away with, I don't know. I mean, I don't know, like if you want to pretend like you have a coworker or like in my case, I couldn't really fool my boss in my wireless career. I wouldn't try to lie to my boss really if I wanted to, because they could georeference me pretty much anywhere. I mean, they have all the tools to do it. Why would I tell them I'm in one place that I'm not? I may as well just call my boss and say straight up, like, if I'm well and don't want to go and I have no intention of going to the doctor, I may as well just call my boss and say like, yeah, I'm just calling to tell you that I'm not coming into work today. So sorry about that. I need a day off. I wish I could explain it to you, but I don't feel like it. And then they could decide if they want me to be employed or not. But no, I mean, it wouldn't benefit me to even lie to a person that would be my boss, because I'm fully aware they probably wouldn't do it. But I'm fully aware, though, that if I did it enough times, they might, that they might after a while go like going, is this person really where they say they are? And then start to look it up. And then if they don't see it, you know, and therein lies the problem. What happens with these digital forensics? Like, are there cases where a person can make it look like they're in one place when they're not? Well, what if you want somebody to think you went to a business trip, you know, on the West Coast or something like that, when you're actually just down the street, you know, hanging out with, you know, your mistress or your lover or something like that? I mean, things like that, guys, just ways of doping digital forensics, ways of spoofing digital forensics and things like that to trick things into like not looking like they actually are. And again, even those systems, like kind of like, I feel like with the way that there's such an overly intrusive, like overreaching, you know, total information awareness type system, even though that's officially debunked or officially decommissioned, it didn't actually become a network of whatever, it still did. Those who don't know what TIA is, it's called total information awareness. It was this overreaching surveillance thing that they were going to build, but then they sort of scrapped and turned into like Genoa 2, Topsail, a bunch of other like data collection projects connected to the NSA. And anyways, guys, but basically, yeah. Oh, yeah. Somebody says you hear about the golf courses being next to them, that they have these things of trafficking. Yeah. So again, guys, places where a person can go, like golf. There you go. Classic. Thank you. That's a great example. I mean, like a golf course is freaking brilliant because if you think about it, you've got the clubhouse environment. A whole bunch of these places are situated above these pretty vast networks of things that go on underground because they've got the whole system. They've got a lot of, I mean, I've actually seen one, honestly. Like my aha was realizing that there was something that was probably going on at a system or connected to a system once I learned the installer of it. I'm trying to be diplomatic, guys. I don't want to be too... I'll just put it this way. Like when I was in my career, there was a couple of contractors that I ran into when I was doing in-building work that I thought were involved with something that was beyond just standard in-building system work. They seemed to be involved with another economy, and it seemed kind of shady. And some of the people that I met, not very many, most of them are really cool people, but a few of the ones that I met just seemed to be just like they seem to almost be gleefully shady and really willing to brag about it in ways that made me kind of go, did this person just like brag about doing what I think they just did? Or it was strange. And I had that experience with a few of these people. And then once I started doing more research after I left the industry and dug deeper into the companies and things like that, I kind of went like, wow, yeah, this all looks really bad. It does look shady. One of them I found was connected to Science Applications International Corporation. And then once I realized that they had done one project that I'd worked on back in, I don't want to say exactly, guys. I feel like I should keep the specific details to myself for the time being. But this one contractor that has ownership with SAIC Leidos at this point had actually worked on the project. And I was at the time unaware because I didn't even have them on my radar. I wasn't even like thinking about them or anything about the company really overall. I wasn't researching them. I was still in my career. And then once I left and I ran into like, I was just looking up business records associated with Leidos and SAIC and who their like companies they owned are. This was one of them. And it was like housed in the same building as Leidos on the 13th floor. And then I was like, wow, they worked on one of the projects. And then I remembered the people that I interacted with. I still have their business cards. That's when I was like, whoa. And I was like, no wonder they were so good at this. Like they gave me these like 3D models of the buildings. Like no contractor had ever given me such a detailed like design and spec package. And it was so far above and beyond what you would expect. And just had these 3D models of scale drawings of the staircases and dimensional things. Like I'd never seen anybody submit something like this in one of my projects. So, and then what made it even more suspect was realizing that from my recollection, they were pretty much the only people that could do it because everybody else that showed up failed to basically perform or provide a sufficient spec package to perform the job. So it just made it to where they were like the only person that you could hire. And I remember that I wasn't even the one that started the project, so I didn't even select them as being qualified to bid. And then what made it even more suspect was the fact that this was not a high profile or high profit job, but they claimed that they wanted to bid on it because they were looking to get in with the company or whatever. And they were willing to fly all the way from the East Coast to the West Coast to work on a project that was worth, I don't know, maybe $30,000, $40,000 budget wise. it doesn't seem realistic because I know what plane tickets cost. I know what these guys spend on hotels and meals. And I know what the overhead is on a project, like, what they're going to charge us relative to what the budget is. There's no way in hell that just that expenses of that one flight alone to do the bid from where they were from on the East Coast could have even paid for doing that job. So economically, the whole thing made zero sense that they were even there to begin with, let alone got awarded the project and wound up installing it. And now that once I reviewed it all, yes, connected to a golf course, connected to a major municipal station in an area that I know has a lot of shady things going on, and where my own pedophile grandfather partially evaded justice for a period of time. That's where he went to get away with it, was in this town. So I do think there's an ecosystem and infrastructure that's within that town in Oregon that is there to protect people like that and give them these protected environments through which to abuse children in private environments that are nearly undetectable. And because no one is willing to do the serious thinking when it comes to doping of digital forensics, these children get no help. The can gets kicked down the road. And jurisdictionally, it's a nightmare because who gets the clearances to these places, especially when they're privately owned and all connected underground? Now you're getting to the whole privacy thing, because the people that just want to use those things that aren't doing anything wrong, they deserve their privacy, and I don't really want to disrupt them. The ones that are letting child molestation go on or human slavery go on, they need to be caught and held accountable. So what do we do about all this, guys? Because do you need some type of group that just polices this privately? And that you all agree that everybody has to sort? I don't know, guys. I don't know what you all do to sort this out, but informationally, we're just going to keep getting closer to where y'all are. I'm just letting you know this. This is just a shot over the bow a little bit to let you know, I respect your privacy, and I want you to know that I do care about you having these types of things, because I do agree in allowable sin when it's between consenting adults and doesn't harm anybody else. But the child exploitation thing that you're ignoring has to stop. It has to stop. And you can't have your special kind of freedom unless you address the lack thereof of others that are underground with you. That's my personal opinion on it. And I do believe that quite a few people share that opinion with me, except those ones have privy and access to the situation that I do not. Yeah, guys, and I'm just telling you, I have actually done, God, did I do airport? I'm trying to think if I've ever done, I think I did some small regional airport evaluations, but never a major international airport that I actually do a signal sweep on. Yeah, I never went to SeaTac. I never went to Portland International for evaluations. I remember them having projects, though. I don't know. Or there being systems there or whatever, having things there, but I never worked on it. But I did actually go into some of the ones that involve tunnels that connect one underground facility. You go down a staircase after going above ground, you enter in, go underground, go down many levels of stairs. Then you're in a great big open area, just this huge, huge, huge room. And going in there and whoa, I can't believe things. I mean, I'm underground. I'm looking around I've never been anything like this before that I can remember. And this was during my work experience, guys. So I have seen some things that are like that. I mean, just to be real with you, but just nothing that involves this type of activity. These were all legitimate, power infrastructure type facilities that I just was able to gain access to and know that they exist and how they're built and things like that. So. And to know what the communication requirements are for them and how they've done it historically. They used to use something called leaky cable that they would put down there. So they'd have a transmitter, they would bring it in from something above ground, and they would put these things called leaky cables and mount it to the top of the tunnel. And it would just be a little bit of RF leaks out, radio frequency leaks out of the cable. And it's just enough signal for them to be able to make phone calls on radios and burst signals back and forth on radios when they're inside those tunnels that normally wouldn't be able to have access to the repeaters that send the signals to the other radios, things like that. All of these types of things, when you integrate DAS into them, can be used to basically hack people's georeferencing. So and again, guys, can you understand like what I'm telling you here about the danger of something like this? That's this scenario here. That's all I'm telling you. Like, please just understand, like those of you that are okay with all this, just once you get rid of this, and, you know, eliminate all your sex offender elements of it that you're protecting in some of these safe buildings and things like that. And I'm just telling you guys, like, you know, look, look, guys, don't tell me that these buildings don't exist, that you're not doing these safe environments for these people. I know you're doing them. And the thing is like, they're never going to do this. Like, I mean, they know better than to do a lot of these things like right in front of you, but they will troll you later on. A lot of these people will absolutely like let you know how much they get away with. And since it seems to be like people like my grandfather, James J. Pettigrew, that's helped facilitate these underground things historically. Remember, he was the child abuser in the family. He evaded justice. He basically admitted to being a child molester, got away with it. He's always had access to these types of facilities historically. He had access to me and people that I cared about when I was a child. Again, these were environments that I can tell you from firsthand experience, just on the above ground things that I'm aware of and witnessed. It's strange. Like even the above ground things that I have a recollection of, I don't like to get into detail on. There's always an element of like, I have a certain point where my memory just clicks off, but there's something that leads into it that I know is a very quote programming type event, where I'm placed on a bed, somebody else is on a bed, there's an adult introduced into a situation on the other one. I have a television placed in front of me in this situation, and then I'm watching this movie. I'm kind of really into seeing the television show or the movie, and then eventually I'm kind of absorbed by whatever it is I'm watching on it, and that everything else is tuned out. And I'm aware that there's something going on, but then this is where all my memory goes to blank, and like all I remember is like a loop of whatever the television show is or the movie. So that's the kind of things, like I have this type of like, I have a memory, but I also have these sort of like a memory of a disassociation of the event, but a knowledge that the event occurred based on my knowledge of who the people were. I actually know in one of these cases that I'm explaining to you who the person was. They get away with it, guys, and these have been the facilities that they've been above historically. And so when I tell you about it, I just wish that, you know, I don't know. I really said it wasn't going to be a marathon session, but I guess I have to do this one last diagram. I'm going to try to cap it here soon. All right. Here's where, all right. So everything I just told you about here, right? These are like tunnel systems, but say the tunnel systems don't exist. Say that you don't accept that there's people that are physically, you know, like actually going like, you know, like this. And then up the ladders, right? Into these other facilities. All right. Yeah, there's that. But then if you don't think that that's a thing, then you must know that there's going to be like telecom, IT, IS server routes, IPs, private internet, and then pipelines that bring, you know, a building like this into here, you know, so that they can link. Now you have other links, right? Now you have data links that bring this into this, this into this, into this. So the blue is data. Equals telephone, data. Okay, now do you see the value of what I'm telling you here? Now that you've added in this other route underground, now you have private telephones that can go from here to here, from here to here, from here to here to here to here. All can transfer files on what are called D.U.M.B.s, which is BlackBerry Enterprise Server. So you don't just have that, you have, you have antennas. Here you have antennas that are routed into certain buildings, right? These are radio frequency waves. So again, these are places where people can enter into the building, be on a private network within this, and then the tower that's out here this signal is effectively like shielded. It goes like, no. The RF is blocked on that building because the signal is going to get pumped in up here from the underground, and then people that are inside the building can just use what's called a DAS. And that means distributed antenna system. Okay, I know that's like really like a jumbled mess, but it's just to help you understand that it's for more than one reason that it's all done. It's not like it's just so that people can travel in underground places and pop up in hatches and everything else like that, or they can bring drugs from one place to another place. Okay, fine, guys, those things happen. People want to meet privately, those things happen. People want to sell drugs, those things happen. Again, there's routes that people have for they don't want to know, like, for example, do you want people, if you're a person that's like, a little bit more paranoid about what's done with your phone data, do you ever want there to be a data association between your smartphone and that of a drug dealer or a gun dealer or any other type of dealer? Probably not. You would want to have an environment that you could go to that looks like you went to a doctor's appointment, that looks like you went to a shopping thing, or that makes you look like you went wherever. And that in that time that you're there, you have a data association that's applied to that place, but then you're actually doing another activity in another location that, again, you enter in one, but that you can be in another. You can enter into a mall and then be inside somebody's apartment for a few hours. You can actually, the way some of these places are set up is that if they have the what I'm told is like maglev type trains underneath, yeah, you can literally go to a location that normally would be like, an hour away in just minutes. If you go into one of these locations, pop up, your georeferencing is still anchored to the physical location above ground that you went into. So your phone will effectively be parked there the whole time, and you can go to a whole different geolocation. But the proof, the evidence would all demonstrate effectively that you were there in that one location the entire time, and you could have been someplace an hour away. So I tell you what, guys, the best thing I can tell you, ladies and gentlemen, is that it's just better, I think, to just sort of like learn. Look, we can't be naive because there's just too many ways for people to sort of just like trick and hoodwink one another. But I'm not trying to make the world like a more suspicious one. What I hope that this does for you is understand that this data is used to drive fears into you in an artificial way. I think that the vast majority of the time, most people aren't really even doing anything wrong or even actually doing whatever. But the data attributions are used very cleverly oftentimes to give the impression to one group of people that something bad is going on that is not, to trick them into warning people. You can accept timelines, whether or not you do, I don't know. But it can be used to effectively trick people into believing a very realistic, digitally, forensically doped data set, and including people that would be from the industry that I came from that actually is involved with digital forensics, because we would be inclined to accept on faith that a tool that told us that that phone's next to that phone and that geolocation and that GPS coordinate at that time is basically going to be right all the time, and we'd have no reason to question it. But if you're a criminal and you have access to these types of systems and you're very, very clever, you would absolutely use a system like this probably to get away with something that could be very, very dark and criminal in nature, guys. So again, this is never to be the person that's taking a whatever on people's fun or their privacy or whatever. It's simply to say that in order for you to have your Shangri-Las, your little paradises for these types of things, which I'm totally cool with, we all have to find some way to address the very real issue that those same ITIS information networks, you have all sort of wild, wild west open to everything. And I'm not suggesting censorship is a way to go, but you obviously can't have your underground networks open up to child exploitation, because that's going to offend all the people that want to just have a normal whatever type of thing. And they're forced into the same box of information as these other people. They're forced into the same environments as these other people who love to be co-located with other people that are operating in a gray area. They always want to, like, you know, so say that you're a person that is a willfully, like, maybe you're okay with you do sex work and you're okay with it. Maybe you're a gun runner and all the customers that you sell guns to are basically just people that are trying to, you know, again, maybe you just don't disagree with the way people skirt laws on guns. I don't know. Maybe it's not a person that's like selling them to, like, you know, cause crimes, but just for somebody who's like a private dealer for whatever, right? I don't know. But the point is that there's all kinds of people that have different things that they'd want to do with a system like this that, you know, they don't want to get swept up with the others. So you all have to figure out a way based on, now that you know that I've kind of revealed how it all works. I'm also making an appeal to people that are in legitimate forms of law enforcement that you don't really want to F with this excessively or these people excessively. I've learned from personal experience, because they will put a hurting on you. But what I will say is that you should leave alone allowable sin. You should really ask yourself before you want to dig into these people's lives and get involved with what they're doing is it acceptable sin? Is it just a bunch of free-willed adults that aren't causing any real harm, or maybe just trying to keep a secret? If that's the case, then leave them the hell alone. I say, I don't think there's any harm in that. You have to have some degrees of checks and balances, though, within this network to prevent this. The pediatric daycare clinic that oftentimes, again, guys, maybe on this floor is a clinic, and then down here, they might do something that like is a pain clinic. And then now you have opiates. And then they'll put a dental office. Now you have, you know, well, you have lots of things involving opiates, gas, Novocaine. All things that can basically like launder things relative to like illegal substances. And then the thing before with the speakeasies, well, some of these things become the new speakeasy. The drugs can get brought in to these different places here, brought into these other places, distributed to all these other spots. Then they, you know, again, it's a way of laundering one place's activities. They could be bringing in opiates into this clinic, and then the opiates could be going into the underground tunnel. These people could be taking it to somebody else over here. They distribute it to all these other places, and then that's how they could be doing pain pills. all using the same thing that they have this pediatric clinic and this daycare or some children's dental clinic or something like that in. And then again, it also provides the environment where, because this parking lot is full all the time and there's kids going in and out of here because it's a daycare and or a children's clinic or something else like that. Well, if most of them are going to doctor's offices, most people are going to assume that when kids go in and out of here, they have a legitimate purpose. But then there's the ones that wind up going down here. Right? All right. So now that you kind of got that part, all right. This one's going to be, I'm trying to think here. Yeah. I mean, you guys have any questions yet or anything else like that? Is there anything that I didn't cover? Let me look in the comments really quick, because I was going to like draw another diagram, but I'm not sure I should go into that much detail. Let's see. Sorry, I'm just now catching up to some of your comments where Wake the People asked, how come you had to do that extremely low frequency, low ranges test for your hearing when you're younger? Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Yeah, you might be interested. I can't remember the name of it, but there's an app out there where it'll generate these high pitched tones, and it'll tell you that people of certain ages will filter them out over time. And so when you generate one, people of a certain age can't hear them. Once you're a certain, like, whatever, older people only hear it. And in some cases, younger people only hear these tones. And so the app will like generate one. And then some people in the room will just go like, oh, stop, stop, stop. And some other people in the room will go like, what the hell are you talking about? I don't hear anything. I mean, isn't that kind of trippy when you think about it? Like how much you can tune into even like a group of people if you just know their demographics. If you knew the whole room of people were basically that age, like everybody in the room that was like older wouldn't even hear the same tone. They would be like, what? What are you even talking about? But all the people that were younger would hear this like, it wouldn't stop, you know? Yeah. Yeah, so I'm just reading. So, True Seeker, you have some good comments on the morality of it too. So, I appreciate that, because that's kind of what I've been trying to get down to, folks, is the morality of all these things. Like, I get it. Like, I don't think by the way, just so you understand, allowable sin never involves the transmission of materials that involve child exploitation. That's never allowable. That's exactly what I'm explaining to you. Like, everybody, just to be clear on that, like where my position is personally. No, that's not ever acceptable. So, if you involve yourself in one of these underground routes, all I'm asking for is, if you want to have your wild, wild west, at least have some checks and balances when it comes to those who cannot control their own free will. If you don't feel bad, like for adults, okay, that's fine. But can you at least like draw the line at children and just say like, no, that ain't okay. It should never happen. And that's all I'm asking for, is like, at least amongst like people that are doing things within these undergrounds or whatever, can we all agree upon some degree of like, whatever. Look, I'm not asking you guys to be like some Gestapo security force or whatever like that, but yeah, you can't have people like that thriving down there. You can't have a bunch of little miniature Epstein Islands everywhere down there, you know? Yeah, I don't know what it is, guys. There's an app. I don't want to get too far off topic, but there is an app that you can find. It will actually do like it generates these tones out of an iPhone or an Android even. I mean, I think that's what it's designed for. It's an app, and I'll have to find it in some time at another time and tell you. Do I think the stories of criminals having honor is bullshit? No. I think that everybody has morality, some degree of morality. No, not at all. I think that the problem is that now, hang on, let me. Yeah, I think the problem now is that I don't know. I think that we don't always really even. I think they got us to believe sometimes in that sort of like that moral barrier. Like, I don't know. I watched the movie Pulp Fiction more than once. I mean, quite a few times I've watched Pulp Fiction. And I think that's what fascinates me about the movie Pulp Fiction. If you really study like what it's doing in all reality, it really covers this whole concept of the human soul, the path of the human soul, what the types of experiences a person goes through, and the morality of what they do and how they try to find a sense of redemption after they've already been involved in something like that's so morally questionable. Without giving away too many spoilers, sorry for those of you who've seen Pulp Fiction, but like the whole thing with Samuel Jackson experiencing what he believes to be divine intervention, where they should have gotten shot by somebody and all the bullets just seem to have gone like right through them. And so he sits there pondering, like, why would there be some type of benevolent or other type of God that would just simply spare me from dying at this moment? Why did they do that? I can't just ignore this moment. I can't ever look back on this moment like it's the same thing. I'm a changed man. There's something about the way that character is processing that moment where, and he has this whole great speech. I mean, I don't want to give it away, guys, but like, if you know the whole speech between him and Tim Roth's character, they call Ringo, Amanda Plummer's character that, I can't remember her real name. I think he just calls her Honey Bunny over and over again, but it is just like, it's just an amazing speech. And there is something to that when it comes to this whole, I guess you could say, morality within criminals. I think that I have even, like, you talk about channeling things. How do I say this, guys? I mean, I have such a strong DNA link that I think what actually even goes on, I don't want to say that it's channeling, but I know that there's times where, like, I'm receiving such a strong influence from somebody that's close to me that I think is just not, they don't want to say it themselves or they can't say it themselves. So there's times where like I'm always me, guys. I'm never using CGI masking. I'm never consciously channeling somebody or something when I'm doing this material or anything like that. But like, you guys have probably seen my material enough to know that I have some abilities to do some things in intuitive communication. And there is some times where, I don't know, for whatever reason, like I just seem to be able to tune in, for whatever reason. Hang on. Yeah. So again, there's something to that, Oh, so you're saying like you didn't know about that? Yeah. So I get what you're saying, man. Like, I would say though that like what's going on right now is that a lot of the people that are, so like you say, you didn't hear about all the kid stuff that's going on. I think it's because a lot of the people that are doing your information technology, they have a knowledge set that the people, how do I say it? I tried to explain it in my Bloodline Wars material a couple years ago. That's when I was getting more information from, quote, the family, good and bad alike. And they were trying to, I think, explain to me that there's different factions within this sort of mafia that's sort of close to whatever is going on in my family. And one, which is closer to my grandfather, James Pettigrew, is very comfortable with child pornography. He doesn't care. He was all about it. He was fine with it. He didn't have any issues with it. If there's anything that James would be doing today, if he were still alive, it would be to create tons of these safe environments where people could get away with it. It's the whole reason that drives me to do a lot of the material to this day, is because I'm still infuriated by the fact that James, despite, a Department of Justice auntie being in the family and now having these people that have all this access to information and security and surveillance, like none of us amongst all of our talents and resources could find a way to get this guy locked up. And he just like molested a bunch of kids, admitted to what he did pretty much like in an open way. I mean, he said it to me and he said it to somebody else that I know right to our freaking faces. I mean, we got a confession from the guy and everybody just let the guy go. And I just have never understood the logic of people that just sort of be like going, well, and then I always ask myself why. And I think it's once I became an adult and started researching it that I had to come to the conclusion that because, well, somewhere within this larger criminal syndicate, my grandfather, James J. Pettigrew, who is a child abuser, child exploiter, and would be into all those types of things, he's comfortable with it. And he has a connection to all the other economies, the drug economy, the other things involving uranium, underground caving, underground boring of the tunnels in ways that are way faster than the ways that most people are told. I'm told things like that. And so it basically ties him to something where he has that as his predilection and all these other people are pretty normal and don't have that going on. And so that secret, I think, was kept from them. I think that he was handling things involving the tunneling with this other part of the family involving the tunneling, creating these bases, creating silos. And then once that they were like sold off and like decommissioned, repurposing them and turning them into other things, I think was probably something that my grandfather was close to, if I had to guess. And it's based on some pretty good research and that he's been too close to the situations along with others for this not to be the case. I mean, it's been too many times, too many cases, too many data correlations that line up to where I'm going like, if it ain't him, you tell me how to explain this. Because he seems to also be connected to the Finders narrative. And again, always whitewashing stories, Marion David Petty. Well, that's the guy from the Finders, and he turns into James J. Pettigrew. I mean, I can whiteboard that cipher right there for you. I'll show you really quick, guys. I mean, here, let me do this. Like the Finders, right? Oh, those markers. All right. So you got Marion David Petty. I can't remember if you spell it Petty or like this, Petty. It's something like that, but I think it's like this though. All right. So this was like Marion County, Oregon. Okay. James Pettigrew. So then James Pettigrew. See the James Pettigrew. Pettigrew. So Marion is a county in Oregon that James had a connection to. So James, and then David was another name in the family. David, well, look, I don't want to start whatever, guys, but yeah, David was a name that circulated in the family. So again, they'll just mix the reality of the details. Marion County, James Pettigrew, and then there was a David there in the mix. So ID, remember, it's the ID day. Anyways, that's the figurative word, just in case you're wondering. I'm not going to say any more on that, but that's just one example, guys, of like how they'll whitewash it into a story that you're all sold and get shocked by, and then go like, the Finder's Cult, Mary and David Petty. Well, like, yeah, and there's probably a crisis actor or somebody out there who will like show up and make some interviews from time to time going like, oh, Mary and David Petty. But it probably wasn't that guy. Again, always buffer characters for the real people, you know? And so that's all everything that we're discussing here really is, in all actuality, is just buffers for data. It's all ways of like taking something that, so that like what I just told you about, like my grandfather, James Pettigrew, and having a connection to all these other things, you'll never attribute to him. You'll have some character named Marion David Petty that has elements of his name, elements of where he's from mixed into the narrative. A lot of the things that he did and was involved in is mixed into the false narrative. And so when you're searching for the real details, you're going to find pieces of it mixed into the overall deception that is called the Finder's Cult report. Now, was Ted Gunderson deceiving you? I don't necessarily think he was. Honestly, my intuition when I listened to Ted Gunderson was that he was researching it genuinely, and the way he explained it was as he understood it. In absence of actually seeing and witnessing it, he was gathering evidence, and that's where the leads were taking him to. These people are extremely good at falsifying the leads. They're extremely good at red herrings. They're very good at drawing false attributions of data to the wrong people. Extremely good at it. Okay? That's all I'm trying to tell you. And so, yeah, guys, sometimes people can push my cynicism buttons to get the worst of me. But see, I'm a little bit more sophisticated to know that you can do things relative to timelines to manipulate people's perceptions currently, so that they'll accept a false narrative that involve these exact falsifications of georeferencing relative to other people and how everything works. It could be right, it could be wrong, but honestly, I have to be honest. I got to tell you, for me personally, I just don't want to know anymore. I don't care that much. My personal intuition is usually enough to guide me. And I don't need a lot of falsified data sets or somebody like sharing them with me or passing them along in ways that aren't really verified or very acceptably verifiable. And I guess because I am aware that sometimes these things are reviewed from other eras, I hope that you'll understand, whether you're from, watching this a week from now or a few years from now, or maybe then, and however that works, however that works, guys, I don't know. But I hope you'll understand too, that you may have been led into a falsified data set. Sometimes people may be trying to trick folks that have access to timeline loops and everything else like that, assuming you believe in those things. I think folks sometimes are finding more and more sophisticated ways of doping those things. And so I think the thing that I've been personally just trying to like figure out that I want to do for myself, no matter what my future holds, is just to like allow my intuition to get the better part of where my heart is, and to trust my heart and to let that guide me into the better decisions, into the better paths. And to know that I don't have to accept a lot of nonsense, and I don't also have to accept bogus data sets. And I do think that there's been a lot of people that have been trying to like steer me off base or to get me into thinking more negatively by trying to get me to accept doped digital forensics. And so all I'm telling you is please, if you're going to try to do that to me or try to do that in any situations close to me, that you at least introduce a little bit more sophistication to the way you're interpreting data sets, because you may have it wrong and you may be causing problems with people's situations or personal relationships in ways that, again, aren't good, So this is just a call for more sophistication with your people's investigations, however you're reviewing information and things like that. And to let you know, I am available to do those types of things or to provide whiteboards, hopefully more legible than ones I did tonight. It's a little bit hard for me to write on this one, guys, like with the position that I'm in, but I'll find a way to do this neater in the future and get better presentations. But anyways, I got to wrap this up. Thanks. Appreciate it.